Good afternoon or good evening. I would like to welcome everyone to Living Well with Myeloma, Sustainable Wellness, an integrative approach to transform your mind, body, and spirit. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question and answer session. To ask a question during that time, simply press star, followed by the number 1 on your telephone keypad. Thank you. Robin Toohey, you may now begin your conference.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you, everyone, for joining us on this evening's call, and I appreciate your waiting to this 5 minutes into the call. We understand that there are many still dialing in, and we would like everyone to benefit from hearing this presentation in its entirety. So just as a quick introduction, I'm Robin Toohey, Senior Director of Support Groups at the International Myeloma Foundation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's Living Well with Myeloma Teleconference, Sustainable Wellness, an Integrative Approach to Transform Your Mind, Body, and Spirit. This topic was selected based on input from patients and caregivers and seems to be a hot topic for all of us to better understand. Tonight's program is part of the IMS Living Well with Myeloma Teleconference Series, which is designed to cover all the important and most up-to-date information regarding myeloma to help you live well. I'd like to thank our sponsors for their support of tonight's call, Celgene Pharmaceuticals and Takeda Oncology. If you have not yet downloaded the slides for today's teleconference, please go to myeloma.org and click on the top bullet under New and Noteworthy, and you'll be able to access the slides there. You can also directly access the slides online at mindbodyspirit.myeloma.org. I'd now like to introduce tonight's speaker. Dr. Mumber is a practicing board-certified radiation oncologist with the Harbin Clinic in Rome, Georgia. He has many accomplishments, including active member of the board of directors for the Society for Integrative Oncology. His research is focused on integrative oncology, and he has a book with the same title as tonight's teleconference, which was released in September of 2012. As Dr. Mumber goes through his presentation, please advance the slides on your computer as necessary. The slides are also downloadable and printable for your use and note-taking. As Ian instructed us, you will have the opportunity at the end of this presentation to ask questions. If you have a question, please press star 1 on your keypad. It is now my pleasure to turn the call over to Dr. Mumber.
Thank you, Robin. And thank you to everyone who's on this teleconference, and I hope that I'll be able to make your time that you're spending with us here today worthwhile. I'd like to share with you a program that we created over the past 20 years or so of working with both patients with cancer and physicians that has been focused on health and wellness. And it really takes advantage of work that has been done by multiple leaders in the field, multiple teachers, and too long of a list to thank for that. I'd like to start off by stopping, because oftentimes it's hard to stop the momentum of the day. We have a lot of things that brought us to this point, a lot of people that have to do certain things to allow us to be here, a lot of things we individually had to do. And so I'd like to just take a moment and bring our attention and awareness here to this present moment. And the best way I know how to do that is by focusing on something that can only be present right here and now, and that's my breath. And so I'd like to just take a moment and have you place your hand on your belly, just above your belly button, and I'll lead you through a brief breathing exercise that you can use anytime, really, to bring yourself and your focus to right here and now. So breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know that I'm breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. And breathing in, I can feel my belly rise. Breathing out, I can feel my belly fall. Belly rising, belly falling.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Breathing in, I enjoy my in-breath. Breathing out, I enjoy my out-breath. Enjoy breathing in, breathing out. And breathing in, I have arrived in this present moment. Breathing out, I am at home in this present moment. I have arrived. I am home. So that's a brief exercise that really helps me, especially when I wake up with the night mind at 3 in the morning. My mind is racing, and I can bring myself to this present moment, and really the only place and time that I can experience anything. So I'm just going to go through briefly the really most of the content and big chunks of our book, Sustainable Wellness, which was written after multiple group and retreat members asked us for a guide that they could follow on their own after groups and retreats that had similar content. We also had a number of folks that wanted to run support groups on their own with the same content that lived in different areas. And my co-facilitator, Heather Reed, and I couldn't be at those individual places. And so we wrote this book so that people could use it as a guide to actually take an 8-week experience with their group. And typically it works best with people that are what we call groups of similars, people that have similar experience, because they share a similar language. So next slide. The first thing that we like to talk about is emptying the cup. And there's a nice little story of a sage and a scholar that lived on the same street. And the sage asked the scholar over for tea one day, and the scholar came over, and they said, well, let's talk about something important, And so the scholar said, let's talk about the meaning of life. And so the sage said, oh, that sounds fun, having some tea. And the scholar started his subcategory A.1 on what life was and what meaning was and how it all came together and so forth, and was just kind of talking along, and the sage was pouring tea into the scholar's glass and just kept pouring it and pouring it and pouring it till it filled up the cup and then flowed over the cup into the saucer and then flowed over the saucer onto the tabletop and then flowed off the tabletop onto the scholar's feet. And finally, the scholar looked down and realized this people were and said, what are you doing? And the sage said, well, your mind is so full of ideas. It's like this cup. There's no room for anything new. And so this thought of emptying the cup, allowing ourselves to be open to new experience, is an important step in any kind of group processing. And next slide. So most of the time and most of our life, and certainly in most of my life, we're skimming along the surface of our life, just kind of going from point A to point B. But occasionally we can have the opportunity, and especially in a safe place with a group of people that have similar experiences that have touched them deeply, in which we can dive down below the surface and go deeper. And when we go deeper, we can often ask ourselves some very big questions. And these are kind of some examples of these very big questions. Where are you? Who are you? Where in? What have you experienced? What are your aspirations? Who and what walks with you? These are big questions of life. Next slide. And so in opening our groups up, I've trained with a woman named Rachel Naomi Remen at Commonweal, who really helped us to find a foundation for our group work. And the first and most important thing is the creation of a safe place where people feel like they can share openly and they're willing to dive deep into things that they otherwise wouldn't share with other people. And so the definition of this safe space really has two components. One, it's confidential. So kind of like Vegas, whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Whatever happens in group stays in group. and two, that no one knows the answer for another person. And this is often the most difficult one. And what's that no one knows the answer for another person, but also that when someone brings something up, we don't need to fix it immediately. We don't need to make them feel better with some of our experiences that may have been similar that we somehow found our way out of, because by doing that, we kind of distance the person from their ability to go deeper. And so simply stated, safe space is confidential holding of whatever comes up without trying to fix it. And so really the job of the facilitator is just to maintain this safe space, to talk about it, to present it, and to hold it. And this is why I like to have, in facilitating the group, I like to have a co-facilitator, because it's often hard to do this, and I'll catch myself all the time trying to fix things. And that's as a physician, trained physician, we're very good at fixing things. And so this is really, these two things, if this is all you take from this talk tonight, and all you do is go back to your group and create a safe space and state that this is what you want to do. We want to be confidential, and we don't want to fix each other. This is really the magic right here. This is the magic. The rest of what is done inside of that safe space is really based on our experience of what builds health and wellness over time. But this is the key right here, creating the container. So next slide. We'll move on to definitions. You know, the title for tonight's talk was there's so much stuff in there, sustainable wellness and the integrative approach to managing health. Gosh, there's so many big words there. And so I'd like to break down words. A good friend of mine, Bernie Siegel, says that one day his grandson was writing on a sheet of paper words, and he wrote them back to back to each other. And he noticed that when words, that words can become swords. So the S can tag on to the other, to the word. And so our words can have very potent impact on others. And every word does ultimately. So the word health is a big impactful word. And what is health? And for the definitions that we like is that health is a state of balance. Health is finding a state of balance in life. And that wellness is the experience of that state of balance. So health and wellness are linked. Wellness is the experiential aspect of that balance we call health. And next slide. So in the first step that we use, each part of the way the book is outlined, again, is really basically a 8-week guide for support groups to use. And one group, 1 week is covered with each chapter. And the first chapter focuses on cultivating awareness. And a nice question that you can ask yourself when you're kind of crazy busy or feel like you're out of sorts is the simple question, where am I? And most of the time, if we're being honest with ourselves, we're either ruminating about the past or we're projecting ourselves into the future. Very seldom are we right here and now in this present. And so awareness, the ability to step back and align ourselves with the part of ourselves that is consistently and always aware, takes practice. Being able to be aware of our busy mind. And most of this awareness, most of this cultivating awareness is through the process that most folks would call contemplation. And contemplation has lots of different kind of branches on the tree. There are lots of ways of being contemplative. From Christian centering prayer to mindfulness-based meditation to volunteerism, there's just a tremendous number of ways to cultivate awareness. But pick one that works for you. It's very important. That brief exercise we did at the beginning where we pay attention to the breath, the only place that can happen is in this moment. And when we pay attention to what's going on in this moment in our body, our mind and our body are linked, and we're automatically aligning ourselves with that part of us that's aware. And most of you, again, most of us, most of everyone will notice how busy the mind is. It'll try to interrupt just the simple act of being aware of what's going on in this present moment. And being aware of that is really the key, because then once we're aware of it, we can stop clinging to whatever is coming up in our busy mind or stop resisting whatever is coming up in our busy mind and just let it come up and stay around for a while and then let go and then kind of move on. So it's really the practice of contemplation. Next slide. The power of stopping. Really, a patient taught this to me. Is a wonderful gentleman who I've been my patient for about a dozen years. Did great with his malignancy, and just a wonderful guy. He always wore the same tattered Georgia football hat, and we got to be friends early in my career. And as my career blossomed, became more and more busy, and our visits, which were mainly just coming in to say hi type of things at that point. He eventually said to me, he said, Matthew, you've gotten so busy. You need to learn to stop and smell the roses. And of course, that's kind of a colloquialism. We've all heard that before, but for whatever reason, it kind of stuck with me, and so started thinking a little more deeply about it, kind of going beyond the surface of it. And the roses were there, my ability to smell was there, but the thing that was missing was my ability to stop. And so finding a way to stop, and when we can stop and be in the present moment, all of a sudden we can be calm. And when we're calm, we can then rest. And when we're at rest, we can do the often difficult work of healing. And probably my favorite definition of that big word, healing, comes from a book by a guy named Stephen Levine, who basically decided that he was going to pretend like he had 1 year to live, consciously did that with his wife's support, and then wrote a book called A Year to Live that I would highly recommend. And in the beginning of that book, he says, if there is a single definition of healing, look with mercy and awareness at those pains, both mental and physical, that we have dismissed in judgment and dismay. So that's a lot of words, but bringing mercy and awareness to those things that we previously did not want to deal with. So that can often be difficult work, and so isn't it better to do that when we are at rest? And so stopping is the first step of that, being able to pay attention to those things that we'd otherwise rather not. Next slide. And so that obviously for Stephen Levine and for myself, I can tell you that that's been my experience. But is there science to it? Well, yes, there is. And there's a great deal of science now. As a matter of fact, the science of contemplation, attention, mindfulness has exploded over the past 5 to 10 years. And so we know now from a scientific perspective that there's kind of a green zone. There's a little zone in which we're optimally able to be ourselves, optimally able to experience what's going on right now. And that little zone is where we're not clinging to or resisting, where we're able to be present and open and awake, watching whatever comes up, letting it be there for as long as it's going to be there, and then watching it fade away. Again, aligning ourselves with that part of ourselves that is always aware. And so that takes a consistent practice, and the more that we're able to do that, it basically feeds on itself the ability to respond to what's going on rather than just kind of a knee-jerk reaction. And so much of what we do with this work in a group setting, it is to find our knee-jerk reactions as we go through the process. And once we're aware of our knee-jerk reactions, we can then watch them and then choose to do something else if we'd like. So it's really an exciting process, and it's amazing to watch the way people move through that process. So next slide. And this really points to the stages of change. Again, kind of a scientific way of looking at it. Contemplation is the key, is the grease that guides the wheel of change. So if we're pre-contemplation, kind of pre-awareness, there's just no way we're ever going to prepare, act, or maintain change over time. However, with contemplation, with that ability to align ourselves with that which is aware, we're able to see our knee-jerk reactions, to see what has led us down, the habits that are not sustaining us, the choices that are not allowing us to live our life fully. And we're able to then prepare and take action and maintain that action over time. So it's vital. It's really the key part, the first key step, and that's why it is the first step of our process that we share together as a group. Next slide. And this really points more to this process as being one of transformation. And transformation is really, there's kind of 3 big ingredients for transformation. The first is that there's a path that works. The second is that you can see that someone has gone through it before and that it's worked. And then third is community. And my tradition is from the Christian tradition, being raised Catholic, and so, Jesus said, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, that's a community. So it doesn't take dozens and dozens or hundreds and hundreds of people. Just 1 or 2 other people that are there can serve as a community that is confidentially holding things without trying to fix them, right? And so that provides the basis for transformation, having a path, seeing that it works, and then being able to share it together in a community. And so transformation is different than translational tools. Like somebody can give you a lesson about how to eat a vegan diet. And you can then look it up online, you can copy it online, you can go out and do your shopping, you can follow a recipe, and you can prepare a vegan diet, and you can do it. However, from a transformational perspective, what we found is that, most folks are not going to follow a specific set of rules very well unless there's some inner change that takes place at a deeper level. And so this more transformational thing is something that change flows from the inside out. And that's what awareness, again, allows. It allows this change to flow from the inside out. It allows this process of change to flow rather than being just kind of a forced issue. It's even very difficult to describe in a way, but transformation is seeing things with new eyes. And it's kind of like another good description is if somebody in a group tells a joke and everybody else is laughing and you just don't get it, well, nobody's going to be able to describe it to you so that you will get it. It's you either get it or you don't get it. That's kind of like what transformation is about. So this whole process is more of a transformational approach, and this is what we've seen over the past 25 years, people literally transforming their lives from the inside out. It's very, very exciting. It's a huge privilege to sit with folks in this situation. So the second step then is we bring our awareness to who we are, who am I, and that's the next slide. And we use an instrument called the Enneagram. That basically looks at the dominant personality pattern. Everybody has a dominant personality pattern. And when we are able to witness our dominant personality in action, it can allow us to then kind of catch ourselves in the act of doing things that are in line with either our greatest good or not so much our greatest good. And then we can choose to basically respond to things a little bit differently. And what I've found is my Enneagram type is 2, the helper. And so I have a real significant need to be needed. And so my greatest strength ultimately ends up being also my greatest weakness, just the flip side of it. And that ultimately I think is a lot of how the Enneagram works, is that it's what you bring to who you are that ends up being the expression of who you are. And so it's really wonderful work. We describe in the book a way to take a brief test that gives you some ideas about your Enneagram type and then give resources to direct folks. So this is really one of the more fun parts of the group. People really get into it, and they usually go home and take it to their spouses and children and kind of type everyone. And it's just really kind of a fun way and an exciting way to about yourselves. There's a great book called The Wisdom of the Enneagram. That's an awesome book that goes much more in depth than our brief overview does as the second step of this program. So it's really an exciting thing. So we bring our awareness to who we are. And then the next step, next slide, goes on to say, okay, we've cultivated this awareness. We have a feel for our dominant way of doing things that's been there our whole life and will continue to be there our whole life. And now where have we been from a standpoint of what has happened in our life? How has this impacted us superficially and deeply? And so we go through the process of a life review, thinking about our childhood, thinking about our adulthood, thinking about major challenges in life. Of course, with patients with cancer, one of the major challenges is the malignancy diagnosis and treatment itself. And that's why it's so valuable to sit in a group of people that have similar circumstances, because they're able to speak a different language. So a group of pregnant women, for example, are going to be able to speak about being pregnant and having a child much differently than, let's say, a group of men that had pregnant wives. It's just not going to be the same thing. So the value of being able to bring our present moment awareness to events that have been in the past. So again, we talked before about awareness being able to be in the present, not clinging or resisting. But we can bring our present moment awareness to past events. And ultimately, as the next couple of slides will say, we can also bring our present moment awareness to future. And so this next slide talks about, again, new eyes, this idea of transformation. So we can bring our new eyes, our awareness, the part of us that is awake and aware, to past and present and future. And I love this Oliver Wendell Holmes quote, "A mind that is stretched by new experience can never go back to its old dimensions." And so it's very exciting to be able to open up our ability to be in the present to the point that we're able to be more with the people that we love. We're able to spend the same amount of time but be more present with those that we love, with ourselves, with others that we're serving, and so forth. And then the next slide, we then bring our present moment awareness to our highest aspiration. Where do we want to go from here? And kind of as we have the life review, the other side of the coin of life review is the life planning piece. What is our highest aspiration? And we know, next slide, that volition is a powerful food. And I love this quote by Winston Churchill. One who has a why to live can tolerate almost any how. And certainly I think this will resonate with folks on this call that have been through the experience of myeloma in some way and how that's touched your life. So these are kind of the first three steps that form the foundation for the group intervention. And again, what we do in group, we meet once a week, usually for a couple hours. We introduce the steps. So the first step is introduce first week awareness, second step. And each chapter has different descriptions and exercises and little tidbits that you can practice that we call yoga bits. That are things that you can kind of sprinkle throughout the day. Yoga meaning union, so not so much yoga meaning putting your feet behind your head and being able to breathe in an enclosed box for 2 hours, but really just being able to have union with the breath, with your life, with your body, and be able to do that in a practical way in little bits so that it's not something that's this big giant project. So the first 3 weeks, first week awareness, cultivating awareness, second week bringing your awareness to your personality type, the third week bringing your awareness to life review, life planning. And then the fourth week we open up fully into a more integrative approach. And one of my teachers and a wonderful author is a gentleman named Ken Wilber, and he is the preeminent author on an integrative approach or an integral approach. And he says that an integral approach addresses all participants at all levels of their being and experience. And so from this standpoint, we address the mind, the body, and the spirit in all members, not just patient, but family member, provider, community members, society members. And we do so in the context of how it influences us individually as a self, mainly through our dominant personality type, culturally through whatever culture we were raised in, and through our experience of the natural world. So this is a big, big picture. And the title of the book that I would recommend from Ken Wilber is A Brief History of Everything. There's also probably even better book to start with of his called One Taste. That's kind of like a journal. It's a wonderful description of this approach. So I'd highly recommend that. And so the thing about integrative approaches or integral approaches, they always precede different levels of wholeness, greater levels of wholeness, always transcend and include lower levels of wholeness. And so, for example, like a cell is part of the liver, and a liver is bigger than a cell, but it doesn't get rid of the cell. It keeps the cell, so it transcends and includes. And all that we do and are ultimately transcends and includes where we have been. And so that's kind of where we are with an integrative or integral approach to medicine. And that's what this work focuses on, bringing us to a point where we can move forward and transcend and include kind of where we have been moving forward from there. So the next slide describes these next 4 steps fairly well pictorially, and this is called the 3-legged stool of health. And so again, thinking of health as balance, it's nice to be able to think about a stool, because a stool sometimes you can go to a restaurant, the table's out of balance. And what do you do if the table's out of balance? You don't re-engineer the flooring system. You certainly don't chop off the leg and try to put a new leg on. You usually just take a coaster and put it under one of the legs, as long as you know which leg is out of balance. And so I like to use that, because if we can take our awareness and really sit on this 3-legged stool of our health, of our balance, then we can figure out where we're a little out of balance, whether it's in physical activity or nutrition or stress management or spirituality. And then we can make little adjustments that can help us along the way to balance. And ultimately, we're always going to be a little out of balance. And so there's no perfection here. And ultimately, the other piece in this type of work is that everybody already has an A+. There's no you can't be a perfect student or a perfect human for that matter. We're all kind of life living through us. And the beautiful thing is that life is living through us in a way that it's never lived through anyone in that same way. So we're all infinitely unique and infinitely fragile and infinitely vulnerable, as well as infinitely powerful. So it's really a great thing that even though this 3-legged stool of health applies to each of us, the experience of it for each of us is going to be infinitely unique. So it's really a cool thing. So the next 4 weeks, after the first 3, include bringing an integrative approach, looking at all parts of ourselves through how all parts of ourselves are influenced by physical activity, by nutrition, by stress management, and ultimately by spirituality. And next slide. This is just a nice little slide that I included because I handed it out to my patients. It just gives us an idea of different interventions. So I won't go over all of them today, but I just say if you can print these out as just ways to kind of know what these little coasters are that you could put under a leg that's out of whack and help support yourself. So we'll go through just kind of a whirlwind approach again, thinking about nutrition. And again, when we go through each week, we focus on nutrition, and then we focus on how nutrition affects us physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, how culture affects it, how our personality type affects it, and how the natural world affects it. So we take that whole big integrative approach and we apply it to each step. And so again, it's pretty big, but there's lots of really nice areas to focus on. Again, this is why patients asked us to write this book, because they found themselves wanting to continually go through the process in group. And we have some groups that have now met after they meet initially with Heather and I, that continue to meet on their own for years and provide a support system for themselves, which is wonderful. So just briefly, I think in the post-Dr. Oz era, all of us kind of know all of these things, or at least have heard about them. The Western diet is not a good diet with the typical cheeseburger on the side here. Pro-inflammatory, and it creates big sugar spikes, which create big hormone spikes, which we know is not beneficial with regards to the balance we call health, and has a negative impact with regards to malignancy. Next slide. I love this book by Michael Pollan. He's a wonderful author. He's written several books. You can look him up on Amazon.com. But this was kind of his summary, which I think is just a nice summary. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And so food is what is food? The word food. Is food Doritos? Probably not. So food is something that's whole, that has been around for you could take it back in a time machine and take it back to your ancestors 500 years ago, and they'd know what it is. That's food. And then don't eat too much, and mostly eat plants. And so again, just a nice summary of a good diet. Next slide. Always one of the big questions, if you're eating food, mostly plants, not too much, you're way ahead of the curve, 99% ahead of the curve. If you want to add the extra 1%, and go organic to stay away from pesticides, hormone-producing things, and fertilizers and so forth, certainly that it's reasonable if you can afford it. It's much more important to get the big picture right. However, there are some foods that are typically more pesticide and hormone laden, and there are some that aren't that bad. So this is a nice list to keep in your pocket to think about. Next slide. There are some foods that have anti-cancer capabilities. Foods that have different substances in them. I'm a big fan of omega-3 fats. I know there have been some literature out there recently. I'm also a big fan of green tea. Of course, melatonin is the master hormone that our brain secrete at night as long as we get uninterrupted dark sleep. So there's a number of foods that have these agents in them, and you can plug any one of these into a decent website with good information, like the SIO website, and there are lots of good ones out there to look through. So the next step then we then go through after going through nutrition, and again focusing on the experience of nutrition, not so much the information. The information is important, and so it's a mix of being able to provide information about kind of what's beneficial and so forth, and then yet still being able to experience it and be aware of how you're responding to it. So the next step is physical activity, and just thinking informationally about physical activity again. The difference between physical activity, which is kind of daily walking to the grocery store, and planned exercise. And next slide, thinking about physical activity, the kind of leisure, household, occupational, transportation. Gosh, your body doesn't know the difference. And then planned exercise, thinking about the big three components: aerobic, strength, and flexibility. So trying to keep our focus on being able to do a little bit of each of those. Next slide. I really like this from a scientific perspective because there's a lot of talk about obesity and its impact. And you look on the left-hand side, and people that have low vegetable and fruit intake, that's a BF, and low physical activity, that's PA. Those folks that are obese that do both of those, they end up not doing quite as well. You know, you can see the pink bar is a little higher, significantly higher than the blue bar, and the kind of little bars that are inside of the bars almost separate from each other. And then if you look at the other side of the slide, the high vegetables and fruits, the high physical activity slide, well, you know what? Obesity really doesn't matter that much anymore. So you have to be a little careful about numbers and how people categorize folks. It's much more important what you do than what we can measure. And that's one of the things about medicine, you know. So it's very important to measure things. It's a beautiful thing. But we also have to be able to focus on kind of who we are and what we do. So the next slide and the next step we go through then focuses on stress management, which gets us clearly into the realm of the connection of the mind and the body. And there's lots of ways that we can use different techniques and tools to approach mind-body connection. Meditation is probably my favorite. I love writing as well, like poetry. Yoga is something that, again, if it's done in a healthy way and can be a very helpful way to connect with the mind and the body. And this is a very busy scientific slide that has all kinds of arrows going everywhere. But the bottom line to this slide is that the mind and the body are connected, and guess what? It makes scientific sense. Next slide. The discrete practice that we outline in the book, or discrete strategy, is to focus on whatever practice brings you the ability to align with part of yourself that is aware, and then allow ourselves to be able to question what's going on. And when we're able to question, a lot of times we can look at our experiences and reframe them differently. So kind of like a really beautiful painting will look completely different in one frame than another. We can experience our life events in the present or in the past from a different frame of reference. And oftentimes that's enough to be able to begin that work of healing, begin that work of merciful awareness. And then once we've been able to reframe, we can respond to similar situations in a different way rather than just reacting based on past experience or future expectations. And then the final part of stress management is that, you know what, we're never going to have stress complete absence, stress elimination. And so being able to surrender, regardless of how hard we try or how much we strive, allowing ourselves to surrender is an important part of stress management. So that PQRS and bringing this is another wonderful piece that just builds up very nicely as a part of that sixth step. The next slide and the next step is spirituality. And, of course, big topic, what's the difference between spirituality and religion? Gosh, this is really a rich time that the group shares together. And we define spirituality as the highest and final concern. And Ken Wilber, again, is wonderful at describing different stages and states of spirituality. That's beyond our ability in this talk to go through, but just suffice to say that people can have very high experiences of spirituality and still at very low stages of development, such that they have a only self-oriented view, and so what they actually do cannot match up with what they say or they believe. And so being able to notice that in ourselves and in others allows for that merciful awareness and understanding to take place. Briefly, just as there are greater levels of physical well-being, there are also greater levels of spiritual well-being. And typically these transcend and include each other, just like the liver and the cell. So initial stages, we're focused on the self when we're born. Gosh, we have all these needs. We come into the world very fragile and needy, and that's just the way it is. And gradually over time, we are then, through usually either great love or great suffering, able to realize the ability to bring the other into our world. And then ultimately, through great love or great suffering, the work of transformation, of seeing things through new eyes, we're able to then take not just the other, but the all, the world itself, into our hearts ultimately. And so one other piece to be aware of is that the seat of the stool, spirituality is the seat of the stool, and it's right in a parallel line running with our awareness. And so our ability to be aware is very much impactful on our ability to have a spiritual life, have a spiritual approach, be aware of our highest and final concern. And ultimately, all of those pieces of the three-legged stool that rest on our awareness also impact our ability to be spiritually aware and have a spiritual life. So that's seventh step. And one of my teachers, I'm a student right now in something called the Living School for Action and Contemplation from Franciscan monk Richard Rohr's institution. And Richard talks about transformation for men, which is much more difficult than transformation for women, who go through a much more difficult life than men and are much more connected with their bodies through just the natural process of life and childbirth and so forth. And he talks about initiation into life in ways that help to transform us. And these are the things that he calls the 5 hard facts of life. That life is hard, you're not that important, your life is not about you, you're not in control, and you're going to die. Now, these sound awfully depressing for a Thursday night talk about health and wellness, but then there are always, the next slide, 5 wonderfuls that correspond exactly to this. Because even though life is hard, the yoke is easy and the burden is light, again, from the Christian perspective, biblical perspective. You're not that important, but every hair on your head is counted. Your life is not about you, but you are given specific gifts to serve yourself and others. And no one has ever in the history of the world, in the history of existence, in the infinity of existence, no one has ever had those same specific gifts that you have. You're not in control, but you do have free will. You can choose. You can choose to respond instead of just react. And you're going to die, but resurrection is a fact, and continuation is a fact. Just look at the natural world. Think about all your relatives and teachers and friends that continue on in you. And so there's really these 5 hard facts followed with these 5 wonderfuls that the depth of spiritual experience gives us. So that's the 7th step, and then we kind of work as a group during the 8th step of putting it all together. I'm just going to very briefly go through the scientific aspects of this that, again, for transformation to occur, for something to be transformative, we have to know there's a path. We know that it works. And so here's some information. Your genes are your genes your fate? Does this actually work? Are you your genes, or are you what you ask your genes to express through your life practice? Does this really impact us physically? Are the mind and the body and the spirit all really connected, and does it matter? And this is one of my favorite authors and favorite works. Looked at, next slide, Dean Ornish looked at men with prostate cancer, put a group that very similar work to this group, to the Sustainable Wellness Group, versus a group that didn't do any of these things. And what they found is that the PSA rise was greater in men that didn't do this thing, and that men actually had their cancer progress significantly. They took blood, and the blood from the group that did this work was 8 times more likely to kill cancer cells than test tube versus the men that didn't. And then the next slide, they actually showed that these changes modulated gene expression. So your genes are not your fate. Your genes do what you tell them to do with how you live, which just makes sense, doesn't it? Next slide. So just thinking about an integrative approach to medicine as you embark on doing this work for yourself, or as you embark on serving others through sitting with them in a safe space, confidentially, and holding things that don't come up, whatever comes up, without trying to fix it. You're advancing and taking part in what medicine is becoming. It is becoming a team approach that's multi-targeted and involves all players throughout the continuum of care. It's no longer a downhill thing from an expert to somebody that just takes it. Next paragraph, or next slide. How does integrated medicine function, or the next way that medicine is moving on? It's really based on loving service, in addition to transcending and including technical expertise. Next slide. So what do we mean by that word, love? Because that's a big word, big 4-letter word you hardly ever hear in a medical conference. And I think it's 2 parts: the intention to unite with an other while maintaining your own individual integrity. So a lion could really love a lamb, but that's not too good for the lamb, so we want to be able to allow each individual to maintain their integrity. And ultimately, the action of love is the desire to relieve suffering in ourselves or in another, which is compassion, and to increase their or our enjoyment of life. And that's really what I think of as kindness. So those kind of 2 parts of love. And then that second word, service. We can help somebody if there's a stronger and a weaker. We can fix something if a part of it's broken and can be repaired by another. But as this little slide on service shows, we can only serve when we're equal at the basic level of our humanity, at the basic level of our fragile and vulnerable humanity. That's where we find our strength, our ability to sit with another at times when we have no answers. That's strength. That's strength. So another way integrative oncology, or the next step, functions, it includes that healing, the ability to heal, as well as transcending fixing. We want to keep fixing, but we also want to open ourselves to that deeper experience of healing. And next slide. And then we also want to transcend just provider and procedure-centered medicine and focus it on relationship-centered medicine. And that's why this work is so vital for us to be able to sit with others and just be with them in relationship. It's incredibly powerful, and it's life-changing. Next slide. So we've talked about a lot of stuff, and again, the eighth step is usually how do we put it all together. And so I'll just briefly go over kind of how, one way. And it doesn't need to be a big thing. It can just start with 10 seconds. One of my favorite stories was of a group participant that whenever he stopped at a red light, he would take time to put his hand on his belly and pay attention to his breath, just for those 10 seconds he was at the stoplight, bringing ourselves to this present moment, not off in some clouded somewhere else, but just being right here, right now, watching the red light, not thinking, oh my gosh, I got to get somewhere, oh my gosh, well, I'm going to be late. And so when we stop, we can become calm, we can rest, and do the difficult work of healing. And as you begin to think about doing this in a group setting, begin the daily practice yourself. Cultivate awareness as the foundation of it. If that's all you do, the rest of it will likely take care of itself. This type of work is like, instead of like a big bolus of stuff all at once, it's like a long, slow burn. We light the candle just a little bit every day, and eventually the candle kind of burns down, and it creates light all along the way. Share it with a group of similars in a diverse community. A community, again, doesn't have to be a ton of people, 2 or 3 people. I wouldn't recommend having a support group bigger than a dozen because it's difficult to have everyone share. And then define what you mean as success as a group and measure it on every level. So I'd like to close with the next slide, which is a wonderful prayer that, especially for all of you that are working to try to bring this work to others in group settings, and I'll just read it, and you can close your eyes if you'd like, and I'll read it, or you can read it with me. God, may my work feel redemptive, even when an ocean of need feels like it will pull me down. May I feel supported when I feel alone in my work. Oh God, remind me when I fail that I can learn, and that my life is than my work. Oh God, remind me when I succeed that I can learn, and that deep success requires the efforts of many. May I remember that going home is a crucial part of the dream. God, help me to remember that I am one of the people I am called by you to serve. May I feel undivided as I transition from sphere to sphere, a whole person within your world. Thank you very much.
Okay, that was very, very, very interesting. And I'd like to ask Ian, our operator, to now open the lines for questions. Ian, can you give that instruction again, please?
At this time, I'd like to let everyone know to ask a question, please press star, followed by the number 1 on your telephone keypad. And your first question comes from the line of Carmen Malatuzzi. Your line is now open.
Thank you, Dr. Matt. Your presentation was very wonderful. I have a question about whether you know where in Spain there is a mind-body institution or doctor. I heard about it and then I lost track of it. Do you know if there's somebody doing like kind of clinical trials or stuff by applying this methodology and measuring the effects on people?
Not off the top of my head, but I do have colleagues that interact with international colleagues more often than I do, and so you're welcome to email me at mmumber@gmail.com, and I will, if you'll ask that question again, that'll allow me to email my colleague, and then I'll get back to you by email.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye. Mm-hmm.
And your next question comes from the line of Hilma Hansen. Your line is now open.
Good evening, Dr. Mumber. Your information was very good. What I'd like to know is that nutritionally, what can I do to increase my white blood count and the red blood count, because they're always dropping?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is really that the whole food, plant-based diet, and then avoiding kind of the foods that are going to cause issues, the processed and sugary foods. And so one of my favorite tools is to drink a smoothie. And there's some recipes for smoothies in the book and on our website. But there are 2 good ingredients for smoothies that I really like. One is whey protein, W-H-E-Y protein. That's a very clean protein source. It's basically the good protein side of dairy, and really kind of the only beneficial part of dairy, I think. And then L-glutamine, which is a enzyme that helps with it's the most dominant muscle and gut enzyme, and so that's another good thing to put in a smoothie. The other thing I would recommend is a decent probiotic. And you can get those. There's a lot of them around, but eating things like yogurt and taking a decent probiotic daily is something that helps with the immune system, which most of our immune system begins in the gut. So Walgreens or lots of different companies like that have a probiotic called Culturelle, which is a very good one.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And our next question comes from the line of Susan Lyons. Your line is now open.
Thank you, Doctor. It was very informative, and I feel really relaxed from listening to your voice. My question is, I do take quite a few supplements, and I want to know, someone had suggested that I don't use them all the time, but take a space between them, like 2 months off and then on again. What do you think about that?
Yeah, supplements I think you have to be careful with, of course, because they're not regulated by the FDA, and so that we don't know 100% what is in them, as much as we do with reductionistic pharmaceuticals. There is value to them, but I think probably the biggest way to look at supplements is for again, kind of like the first thing, the foundation is let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food. So that was 2,000 years ago. Hippocrates said that. And so, however, I do think there are certain things that we just can't get in our diet because of a variety of reasons, soil depletion, availability, these types of things. And so this is where I think it's important to have a good provider who can evaluate your supplements, look at what their ingredients are, that has some knowledge in the field. And so I would look for a provider in your area that has integrated medicine training. My integrated medicine training was at the University of Arizona with Dr. Andrew Weil. And if you go on the University of Arizona Integrated Medicine website, you'll be able to find providers throughout the world, throughout our country and throughout the world. And there's almost certainly one in your area. And so I would look up one of those providers and go sit down with them and go over everything in person and they'll be able to guide you better with regards to timing, what to take and how much to take.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, Dr. Mumber, it's Robin. I'd just like to add a little caveat to this because myeloma patients are typically on a specific treatment to keep their myeloma in control, and we want to make sure that patients always talk with their physicians to make sure that the supplements they may be taking don't counteract with their proven myeloma treatment. So we don't want anything interfering with how their myeloma treatment may work. So always discuss supplements and vitamins, and does it work with what you are taking as your myeloma treatment?
That's a great point, Robin. Again, the supplements, when we think about an integrative approach, we think about prevention and support and anti-cancer therapy. And we definitely don't want something that we're taking to support us to interact badly with something that we're taking that is anti-cancer. That would be a bad thing. So, yeah, it is a very important point. Always tell your doctor whatever you're taking, no doubt.
And I think, Ian, we have time for one more question tonight.
And that question will come from Donna Folks. Your line is now open.
Hi, Dr. Mumber. Thanks for your presentation. It was really interesting. I noticed that on your list of goodies there, if I may call them that, you had green tea. And I was told by, I'm pretty sure it was my hematologist, that surprisingly recent studies have revealed that that isn't a positive thing for cancer patients.
Yeah, so only if they're taking a specific anti-cancer therapy, which is oftentimes used. There is a specific anti-cancer therapy called Velcade.
Okay, I was on that when they told me that. That's the answer then.
That's exactly right. And so with that specific therapy, then that's the key. And so the other thing about it is, how do you get your green tea in? Because, and you'll find this a lot with these natural supplements, is that people will try to kind of deliver them the same way as pharmaceuticals, so like in a capsule form. And so people will start taking green tea supplements that provide like thousands of cups of green tea in one little pill, and that can be harmful. So again, very big difference between having a cup of green tea or two a day and its health benefits versus using it to try to have an anti-cancer benefit. So thinking about the preventive aspect of it versus the supportive care aspect of it versus the anti-cancer aspect of it. And really, when you get to the anti-cancer therapy, the things that we've showed from a standpoint of anti-cancer therapy as working, which are typically chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, are the anti-cancer therapies. These other approaches are ways to support us through the process. And as the study by Ornish showed, they can often have an impact on how people's cancers do. But typically the way they do that is much gentler and at a much lower level than the than the anti-cancer therapies, which also, of course, they have higher benefit, specifically anti-cancer-wise, but they also have potentially higher risk. So it's important to keep all of this in mind as you go through. And again, make sure you discuss these things with your physicians. That's one perfect example of it. And I think there's value to, and most institutions around the country now have adopted integrative or approaches to medicine that include physical activity, nutrition, stress management, cultivating awareness, and spirituality. And if your institution doesn't have that, then I would ask them why, because they can look at major institutions, let's say like MD Anderson, Memorial Sloan Kettering, and these are folks that are the major institutions. And
they do have that here. Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And their goals and sort of things, the framework might be a little different than yours, but they're coming at the same things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Okay, well, I would like to thank Dr. Mumber for taking the time this evening to help us better understand this mind-body-spirit connection. And a few reminders I would like to leave all of you with is the IMF is a wealth of information, and specifically if you want to search a little bit more on supplements, there are many myeloma blogs that Dr. Dury has written on nutrition and the importance of discussing all of these things with your own doctor, because we all know myeloma is very individual, and what treatments work for one may not work for another, and the supplements that we may be taking definitely need to be discussed. And so also the replay of tonight's teleconference will be available early next week on the IMF website. And as always, you can access all of the previous IMF teleconferences at replay.myeloma.org. And I would like to ask you to mark your calendars, because we've just marked the date for the IMF next teleconference, and that will be on June 18th. And this one will be with Dr. Dury, helping us to learn more about the current trends in myeloma treatment and research with an update from 3 major medical meetings. Dr. Dury will explain what's new and exciting from the American Society of Clinical Oncology, which is ASCO, and the European Hematology Association, EHA, and the International Myeloma Working Group Summit, IMWG. Those are 3 major medical meetings happening. So you won't want to miss the next free 60-minute IMF teleconference. Again, save that date. It's June 18th. And don't forget, if you have questions, the IMF has answers. We have the IMF info line, and that toll-free number is 1-800-452-2873, which spells CURE. And we have Paul Hewitt, Missy Kluktar, and Judy Webb that are available to help you access resources and answer your myeloma-related questions. The phone lines are open Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Pacific. So thanks once again to Dr. Mumber and to our sponsors, Celgene Pharmaceuticals and Takeda Oncology. And most importantly, thanks to all our participants on the call tonight. Have a wonderful evening.